And certainly as I look at some of the legislative bodies with which I worked today, they've certainly become very strong and important institutions in shaping democratic governance in their countries, particularly Costa Rica, the National Assembly there,
right.
The National Assembly in Nicaragua. They have done significant things in terms of their countries.
But didn't you tell me that you made a reference, perhaps 20 years ago, there were only 3 countries that had locally elected officials, and now what's the...
Now there are only 2 or 3 countries in the hemisphere, speaking about this hemisphere, that don't have elected local officials. That's been one of the things that the U.S. government, and for that matter the Inter-American Development Bank, the United Nations, all have put a lot of emphasis upon in terms of institution building in this hemisphere over the past 2 decades. And then you've seen a lot of change. Countries where really the focus was entirely on the national government, you now have built infrastructures of local governments that play more and more role.
And why do you think that's important? Why do you think having these locally elected officials is so important? Within the context of international relations, why should we care about what's happening?
Well, one of the things that I've frequently say in the many speeches I give overseas, I often quote a British political commentator of a century ago, Lord Acton, who commented that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And if that is the case, then what's really important, and I do think this is critical for democratic governments, is to fragment power and to decentralize power and to create multiple sources of power and authority within a society rather than a single dominant source. And one way to do this is to create multiple governmental institutions. And you can see this, how important this has become in many of the countries of Latin America, because frankly in many of the countries the mayoralties of major cities is becoming a real strong institutional base,
becoming a power base
for people, particularly from what have been opposition parties, to begin to build the resources necessary to challenge parties that have dominated in the countries for many years.
Right. Again, within the context of international relations, you know, the legal framework that you are helping with your technical assistance and your support to these different government initiatives also spans into other areas, including human rights issues, democracy, improving the environment, and labor relations. You know, these are it seems as though the work that you and your institute at Florida International University has developed over the last decade has shown dramatic results in these areas. Perhaps you can give a specific example.
Well, sure. And one of the areas, probably in part because the problems were so significant that our impact has probably been greatest, was in the country of Paraguay, which for 30 years had the closest thing really to a fascist dictatorship that any country in the hemisphere has had. And in 1989, when the longtime dictator of the country was overthrown, the U.S. government began to institute through USAID a variety of projects, and I was asked to head one of the first, probably the first democracy building project in the country.
Wow.
And it you know, we worked in areas with all kinds of activities. We worked with mid-level regional governments, we worked with local governments, we worked with citizen groups, we worked with the national government.
And today, are you seeing the results of the groundwork that you laid a while back? I mean, are you seeing such a...
You can see a lot of differences in a lot of ways. Paraguay is obviously a country, as are more than several countries in the hemisphere, ones in which democratic governance is still a very fragile sort of situation. But on the other hand, many of the key people with whom we worked are the people who on a couple of occasions when there were real threats of military coups to bring back a dictatorial government. These were people who came to the rescue of the democracy of that country. And in particular, we were talking about locally elected officials. The mayor of Asunción, Paraguay, has emerged as a major counterbalance in many instances to when the military has thought about taking control of the country again.
You mentioned the mayor of Asunción. I believe that you and your institute has helped initiate one of the largest mayors' conferences in the hemisphere, if I'm not mistaken. Can you tell us about
the largest, yeah. Actually, in conjunction with Miami-Dade County, and particularly with the support of Miami-Dade County Commissioner Javier Soto, we have for 9 years been organizing here in Miami-Dade County the Inter-American Conference of Mayors and Local Authorities. That now is the oldest and the largest annual gathering of people concerned with local government issues in Latin America. And this past June, when we had the conference, we had 550 people from Latin America. And unlike many conferences on these kinds of topics where the U.S. government sponsors it or something like that, and people get their way paid to come to the conference. Sure. In this case, these are people who all come on their own, financed by their local governments or financed by themselves.
And I imagine the importance of this conference is more significant now than ever, given the fact that Miami is up for the headquarters seat for the ministerial for the free trade area of the Americas. And I know that your work has been significant in working with these mayors and all the other legislators to understand the importance of the FTAA.
Yeah, well, certainly that. I mean, Commissioner Soto, for example, has made sure at each mayor's conference to talk about that issue, and Mayor Pinellas as well.
Okay. Well, we'll learn more about these topics upon our return after we take a break. I'm Whitney Belker with Miami's Global Connection. Hi, welcome back to Miami's Global Connection. I'm Whitney Belker. We'd like to welcome back Dr. Allan Rosenbaum, the Director of the Institute of Public Management and Community Service, and also Mr. Ed Cooke, the President Chapter of Greater Miami United Nations Association. Welcome.
Thank you for being here.
So, the United Nations Association. To my amazement, I learned that the United Nations Association is a bipartisan non-profit organization that is the largest foreign policy group in the country. What is this all about?
And truthfully, it's really a group of volunteer people who stay informed, who are very positive, and who are very supportive of the field work of the United Nations staff, the many, many different agencies, whether they're UNESCO and the upcoming decade of literacy, which is going to be so important, or UNICEF with its great work with inoculating children.
All right. Don't you also have a Literacy Day focused on, what exactly is Literacy Day about?
It's one of the specialties of the Miami chapter that we are very, very interested in promoting that. We're in contact right here in my